What it do, flight crew? FTC. FTC. Flight team stand up. Why July? It's July. That June don't hit, you know what I'm saying? It's hit different now, yo. Hey, man. We got a very interesting video today. Educational basketball type of video. Back at it again with man Jimmy High Roller. We have when a 17-year-old met his equal at a basketball camp. 17-year-old MJ met his equal at a basketball camp. It seemed interesting. I like watching, like, you know, rare throwback basketball films like this, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, it can remind Flight, you know, look, anything's possible. You know, Jordan didn't make his high school basketball team where he got cut from his high school basketball team one of his years and shit. You know what I'm saying? So, let's check it out.
In the summer of 1980, the most elite high school basketball players in the country gathered together at the annual 5-Star Basketball Camp. At 5-Star, these top high school players would showcase their skills to college scouts and learn from the most prestigious minds in basketball history. Over the years, the 5-Star Basketball Camp has hosted dozens of all-time greats. LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, Stephen Curry, Vince
Look at Curry,
Carter,
man.
Anthony. In its 54-year history, if you were a top high school prospect, you were at this camp.
It's crazy. I think I may have been at that basketball camp back in the day because I went to a couple basketball camps. I just didn't have the cameras on. Maybe this may have been one of them.
Prospect, you were at this camp. Since 1966, the 5-Star Basketball Camp has featured over 500 future NBA players and over 10,000 Division I players.
Wow.
And in 1980, the camp's talent pool was loaded. Patrick Ewing, Chris Mullin, Dominique Wilkins, and one of the younger players in the camp, a relatively unknown 6'6" high school sophomore out of Maryland named Len Bias. In 1980, Len Bias was still a raw, naturally gifted, and freakishly athletic phenom who felt lucky enough to get invited to the camp. Just 6 years later, Bias would go on to be a college basketball legend and a second overall pick in the
R.I.P. Bias, if you know the
NBA
story.
draft. Bias had
Sad.
just wrapped up his sophomore season at Northwestern High School with his teammate and fellow high school standout Brian Waller. But being a relatively new face in the elite basketball circuit, Bias spent his first few weeks at camp getting to know some of the other camp attendees. With the help of a camp counselor, Bias and Waller were introduced to the camp's brightest young talent. One of the players Bias met in his first week of camp was a skinny 17-year-old shooting guard out of North Carolina. A 6'5" high school junior who was also an unknown at the time. The kid introduced himself to Bias as Black Ice, but you may know him by his other name, Michael Jordan. Jordan and Bias spent the next few weeks together at camp, learning from one another, growing their games together, and eventually becoming friends. Bias, who grew up just 2 miles outside of the University of Maryland campus, even gave Jordan some Maryland gear. Two of the most talented players in the country. But their friendship went far beyond this summer camp. In the following years, Jordan and Bias stayed in touch. In 1982, when Bias was a senior in high school, he and Brian Waller met with Michael Jordan and a friend at a University of Maryland football game. Of course, their competitive nature didn't take long to kick in, and before the football game was even over, Bias, Jordan, and their two friends left the game to play some 2-on-2. Years later, Brian Waller proudly stated that he and Bias beat Jordan and his friend. Little did these two phenoms know, they would spend the next 2 years going head-to-head while climbing the ladder of all-time great generational talents. In the mid-80s, just a few years after they met at that camp, it was all Len Bias and Michael Jordan. Everyone else was in a race for third place. But in February of 1984, during the rise of these two legends, they had a matchup for the ages. And let's just say only one of them came out on top. By 1983, Michael Jordan was well on his way to being one of the best collegiate players in the country. He already won an NCAA championship with the Tar Heels and hit a shot that immediately turned Michael Jordan into a household name.
Nice.
Meanwhile, Bias was just beginning his collegiate career, coming off the bench for a solid Maryland squad. And on February 12, 1983, the two friends would face off in a regular season matchup that fans would soon not forget.
Back to Matt Doherty. Michael Jordan takes it and gets it. That's Jordan fills the left lane. They get it back to him, and it's good. Long jump jumper by Michael Jordan. Doherty right back out. Michael Jordan for three. His son, North Carolina by 3. Minute 24 left and a half. Michael Jordan as Atkins hits the deck. Michael Jordan, baseline.
Damn, nice shot. It's crazy, man. It's so, I have a lot of similarities of Michael Jordan, man. Like the way he comes off of like the screens and just his jump shooting and stuff. There's a lot of similarities, man.
Len Bias over having a word with his coach, Lefty Drizel.
And he gets fouled. Now he should have shot this ball right here. Once he got fouled, instead of passing off just like North Carolina. Oh, look at Michael Jordan comes to the weak side. He does that about 5
this half. Bias.
Oh, yeah. Everything going there.
Nice shot.
Look at Atkins. Hey, fellas, it's not the end of the game. There's a lot. Getting a shot up. It's a little bit short. The rebound taken by Bias.
Very wise. They haven't tried to tempo the game. They just keep playing hard.
Jordan takes it away from Atkins, moves on field.
It's my type of layup. Nice transition.
Jordan has said it earlier that Maryland in 73-74 season.
A sophomore Michael Jordan came out blistering hot, scoring 15 points in the first half. The kid was absolutely lighting Maryland up on offense and shutting down the Terps on defense. There wasn't a 30-second stretch throughout this entire game where Mike didn't do something spectacular.
Wow.
In a game that featured 6 future NBA players, 4 of which would go on to be top 4 picks in the NBA draft, MJ was far and away the best player on the court. But while Jordan was single-handedly keeping the Tar Heels in the game, Len Bias was just getting off the bench. As a freshman, Len hadn't earned a starting position yet, and there was no real comparison between him and Jordan. In the end, MJ finished with 21 points. Bias had 11 to go along with a sick dunk that had Brad Doherty ducking for cover. Oh, fuck! Mike was clearly the better player and had a 1-year head start on Bias in college. But it was a 1-year gap that Bias quickly closed in on it in his sophomore campaign. Because the very next season, Bias went from a role-playing freshman to a sophomore superstar. 11 months after their 1983 matchup, Len Bias and Michael Jordan were set to face off again. And this time, Bias was ready.
At that time in the ACC, there were 3 guys that stood out above everybody else. Michael Jordan, Ralph Sampson, and Len Bias.
Hitting the open shot. Here's a long pass to Bias. Got the basket and drew the foul. He will this time. Len Bias with the run. Boy, can he fall. What a pass. Penetrate, gets the ball back. Already has 12. Now he has 14. Bias will shoot out from the top of the circle. He's made him from absolutely everywhere tonight. Well, 16 points. Matt Doherty dumps it outside to Michael Jordan, and he hits him. Move all the way. Michael Jordan up the floor. Look at the move by Jordan. No basket, offensive foul. Just to amaze me, he gets to the open spot on the offensive board, and there's Len Bias at the other end. Lenny Bias, who's had such a big... He's playing the clutch situation right now. Jordan, another great move, missed the shot, but he falls. I guess that is a pretty fitting end to the ballgame.
Hey, the rock the cradle dunk. Oh, shit.
Michael Jordan took a look at the clock, said 2 seconds left. I'm going to give him something to rave about.
In an epic showdown against 2 of the best teams in the country, Len Bias and Michael Jordan put on an absolute clinic, going back and forth the entire game. Mike comes down and hits a ridiculous layup. Bias comes back and knocks down a silky smooth jumper. Mike throws down a monster dunk. Bias comes down and goes right back at him. These guys were putting on a show. By this point, Mike was well known for his uncanny flair and incredible abilities. But for the first time in Michael's collegiate career, he was sharing the floor with a player that was even more electric than he was. The same kid that Mike had built a friendship with just 4 years ago was now putting buckets on his head. Bias scored a career-high 24 points and actually outscored Mike. This was rare. Fans knew they were witnessing the beginning of a legitimate rivalry. Later that season, Bias led Maryland to an ACC tournament championship while earning tournament MVP honors as a sophomore. And MJ was holding up his end of the rivalry by leading the Tar Heels to a perfect 14-0 conference record, lifting UNC to the #1 spot in the country for 15 straight weeks, and winning just about every award college basketball has to offer.
Nice.
But you know damn well the story doesn't end there. Michael knew the NBA draft was just a few months away, and being the psychotically competitive winner that he was, Mike refused to go out getting punked by his friend and younger rival. So on February 19th, 1984, in their last college matchup, Michael Jordan made it his obligation to let Len Bias know, off the court we could be the best of friends. But on it, Bias was just another guy in a jersey. Mike was out for revenge.
You know, I'm not saying he wasn't a threat, but me being compared to him, I took offense to that.
Alone, misses, but it's 4-2 Carolina. Jordan drops it home for Michael Jordan. Later, Jordan with a move on the baseline. Wide open is Bias. Ooh, he got it down the hole in a hurry. Bias is left alone again. And Jordan picks up the foul. There it is right
Good shot.
Jordan is free from the side and nails it. And there's Jordan, three. Freshman pulls up.
That's blocked.
It leaves Coleman alone, and Jordan blocks him. Fouls from the replays. Coleman. Oh, followed in by Bias. Hale, Jordan wants it. He's got it. Test 16. Jordan from outside. Jordan improving his luck.
Anytime he wants, whatever he wants.
There's Jordan again, knocking the ball out of bounds. Oh, he has the NBA salivating in his play. What a man.
Oh, that's my type of move. I'm doing that by December. That little stutter step, I did that before in the IRLs.
He wants to do his thing.
My type of best.
And Hale, and he gets it to Jordan. Oh, he is an amazing athlete. We have a timeout.
Raise the white flag. It's all over, D. Get him out of there.
In the last game Jordan and Bias would ever play each other, Mike scorched Maryland for 25 points and 7 rebounds on 71% shooting. Bias put up a noble effort dropping 16 points, but it became clearer than ever, at least in that moment, Michael Jordan was the superior player. Now, Bias was elite. In fact, Len Bias was the second best player in the entire conference. But MJ was on a tier of his own. He was too smooth, too explosive, too accurate, and too much to handle. At only 21 years old, Jordan already looked like a seasoned vet. And even as the overwhelming force that he was, Len Bias still had work to do. Over the next 2 seasons, while MJ was making the NBA look like a rec league, Len was honing in on his skills at the college level and improving by the day, making huge strides towards becoming a future NBA superstar and earning praise that you very rarely see from a college player. After spending 4 seasons at Maryland, winning 2 Player of the Year awards, and terrorizing college basketball, Len Bias was drafted with the 2nd overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft. Of course, most of us are all too familiar with how the story ends.
R.I.P. Len
A
Bias.
player that was truly destined to be one of the greats, gone before he could even play his first NBA game. Many fans speculate on the legacy that could have been. Bias was drafted to a Celtics team that had just won an NBA title 9 days prior. Bias could have been the extra piece the franchise needed to carry their success into the late 80s and 90s. He could have been the NBA rival that Michael Jordan never had. I mean, some players attempted to rise to the occasion, very few found success, but no one really challenged MJ once he reached his peak. Charles Barkley, vanquished. Gary Payton, repressed. Isaiah Thomas is the only player to really give Jordan a run for his money, but once MJ found success in the league, Isaiah never won again. The manufactured Michael Jordan-Clyde Drexler rivalry literally offended Michael. Reggie Miller had some moments, but MJ always had bigger ones. There wasn't a single player that could actually go toe-to-toe with Jordan, except Len Bias. Fans that witnessed Bias in action believe he could have been the player to challenge Jordan throughout the 90s. But we'll never know. And the legend of Michael Jordan grows stronger. But the legend of Len Bias is still alive and well. The kid who not only held his own against Jordan, but was one of very few to come within reach of the GOAT. The same kid who showed up to a basketball camp 40 years ago, made friends with a fellow high school hooper, and lit a violently bright but brief flame. Hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time.
Hey, man, that's gonna cap it off. Very interesting story, man. As usual, man. Coming out by FlightReacts next, man, on the road to 3 million.